Hi everybody, this is Anne again, and today I'm going to read to you from my book called Tui Street Heroes. And Tui Street Heroes is my second book, and it's about the Tui Street kids again. And the Tui Street kids have got a student teacher who's come to their school, and so Mr. Tamati is still their school teacher, but their classroom teacher. But this new teacher, the student teacher has come, and she's learning how to be a teacher. Anyway, she wants to help the kids learn how to write a story more easily, because sometimes some kids find it really hard to write a story. So she tells them that they can use this idea called the hero's journey, and she gets them to imagine that in a story, maybe for example, there's a character who lives in a village, and the character's name might be Alex. And Alex could be a girl or a boy. And so Alex is in this village and everything's normal. But then one night a dragon comes and attacks the village and breathes fire onto the houses, and the houses burn down. And so the village is under threat. And the next morning, all of the people in the village decide that this young person called Alex, has to go and deal with this dragon, maybe kill the dragon, maybe put the dragon to sleep instead if Alex doesn't want to kill the dragon. So this is what's called the call, adventure calling, the call to adventure or adventure calling. And now Alex has to go and deal with this adventure, has to go and solve this problem. But it might not be easy for Alex. And sometimes kids in schools that I've visited have said things like, when I've said what might be the difficulties or the challenges that Alex has to face, they say things like, maybe Alex ends up having to go through bushes that have got like itchy type things that cut at your arms as you go through the bushes. So that might be the first difficulty or challenge that Alex has to face as Alex tries to get to where the dragon's cave is, the dragon's den. And so Alex has to face these difficulties. It might be another difficulty is that suddenly these strange, like a massive swarm of these strange insects come out of the sky and start attacking Alex, and Alex has to run and escape from these strange swarming creatures. And maybe a massive bird that Alex has never seen before chases him, chases him and is trying to pull at his hair and pull at his clothes or her clothes, depending on whether Alex is a girl or a boy. And finally, Alex gets to the dragon's cave, and this is the most difficult challenge because now Alex has to decide what to do about this dragon. And so Alex stands outside this cave and can feel the hot breath of the dragon, the heat from the dragon, the flames from the dragon's mouth. Alex can hear the dragon snoring. Alex is getting more and more nervous. But maybe before Alex left the village, an old wizard-like man or an old good witch of the village gave Alex a thing called a talisman. And a talisman is something that has special powers. And maybe it was something like a special wand or a special bow and arrow that Alex fires. So as Alex enters into this cave and hears the dragon breathing, Alex starts to pull out the special bow and arrow. And the bow and arrow, when Alex faces this dragon, maybe the dragon roars, maybe the dragon shoots flames, because this is the most difficult challenge. And Alex has to pull back on the bow and arrow and hit the dragon with this bow and arrow. Now maybe the arrow is dipped in some kind of sleeping potion so that the dragon sleeps. And slowly Alex pulls this dragon out and places this dragon into a massive field with walls around it, with fences around it, and leaves the dragon there to live forever in this beautiful field, but never able to get out because these walls might be flame-resistant walls. So that was the most difficult challenge. So the hero or the main character has to face challenges and difficulties, but then there's always going to be one that is the most difficult one. And then the hero or the main character has to start to go home. Now, the return to the village isn't always easy either. It might be that other dragons that are under the rule of that main dragon chase Alex back, and Alex has to use the bow and arrow a number of times and drag all these dragons into that field until Alex knows all of the dragons are safely in this field. And then finally, Alex can return home and go back to normal, ordinary life. So this new teacher, this student teacher who's been teaching the Tui Street kids, teaches them this special way you can write a story, that you have a special character who's like a hero and leads the normal world, faces challenges, maybe has a talisman, something special someone gives them to help them deal with this slightly dangerous adventure. They leave the normal world and answer the call to adventure, and off they go. They face difficulties, they face challenges. Then they come to the biggest challenge, the most difficult challenge, and they have to deal with that challenge. And then once that challenge is solved, they start to return home. They go for the return home. But even then, there might be some difficulties, but they eventually get back home to the normal world. Now, Miss Brennan, the student teacher, who's Irish, she says in her Irish accent to the kids, "Now I want you all to write a story, a hero's journey story, and I want you to write it using a character who is setting off on that kind of a journey." And so the kids start to write their own hero's journey stories. Just to show you that in this book too, there's again the map of the street. You can see Tui Street there. And on the cover is Harry, who you might remember from the Harry and Gemma story in the first book. And this is the second story of this book, where Harry has this strange, frightening creature try to attack him. But we're going to look at the first story, the hero's journey story, that the first one that happens in Tui Street Heroes. And what is interesting is as the kids write their own stories, they realise they are actually on a hero's journey story. So they have to deal with the difficulties and the challenges in their own lives. So here is the very first story, and this one is called Sky Country. And you can see the picture at the front has a tree that's going up into the clouds. And you might remember that in the first book, in Jack and the Moorpork, Jack and Tim go up this tree. So let's start this book. And you might notice, actually, just before I start, this book is, each story is broken into 3 parts. And this first part is called Adventure Calls. I don't know if you can see that properly there, but it says Part 1, Adventure Calls. And so we're looking at this story, and this is the bit in the hero's journey where an adventure calls. Okay. Something had woken Ella. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to the hush of Tui Street, sleeping. There was something else, though, something distant. She slid out of bed and pulled the curtains. The moon was still out, its orange edges softly merging with the lightening sky. Everything looked and sounded like it should. Curtains were closed in the houses, and Ella could hear the murmur of the creek behind Jack's house across the road. The only house with a light on was number 11, Mr. Nalfahu's house down the street, but he had always been an early riser. Ella often saw him through her bedroom window when she was getting up. Each day he walked carefully up and down Tui Street, his cane in his hand. Sometimes he paused by the tall tree in Jack's front yard and gazed up for a few moments before continuing his walk. He once told Ella that long ago he'd seen a huge bird drop a large seed from its beak. The seed had landed in front of Jack's house. Mr. Nalfahu had examined the seed and left it where he'd found it. The next day, the tree in front of Jack's house began to grow. Ella yawned. It was Saturday morning. She should go back to bed. There it was again, though. That sound, stretched so thin it was almost nothing, yet it was something, a tiny and fragile sound, as if her kitten were mewling at her from across a vast space, from the furthest edge of the horizon. Ella stiffened and turned from the window. Ngeru was not on her bed. Their old cat, Bilbo, lay curled up on a folded blanket at the bottom of the bed, but Ngeru, her kitten, wasn't there any more. He'd slept beside her every night since her birthday 6 weeks ago, when her family had snuck the little kitten in while she was still asleep and placed the tiny tabby kitten beside her. She'd woken to a rough paw swiping at her cheek. For the birthday girl, her stepmum Serena had said, smiling and reaching down to tickle the kitten under her cheek. Ella had felt the vibration of his purring through her fingers on his back. Ngeru, she whispered to him. It meant cat in Māori. The Tui Street kids were learning te reo at school. Now, for the first time ever, Ngeru was not on Ella's bed. Quickly changing into her jeans and a t-shirt and tying her hair back into a ponytail, Ella slipped out of her room and down the small stretch of hallway to the front door. She didn't want to wake Angela and Rita, her little stepsisters, because they'd want to come with her, and Ella didn't want to waste time. What about her dad and Serena, her stepmother, though? If they woke and she wasn't home, they'd worry. She crept back up the hallway to the kitchen and left a note on the bench, gone to find Ngeru. Across the road in front of Jack's house was the tall, tall tree. Ella walked over to it. Had Ngeru tried to climb the tree again? On the clearest of days, the tree stretched up further than anyone could see. Now, with dawn only just breaking, it was difficult to make out even the first branches above her. Ella willed her eyes to see further. Ngeru, she called in a loud whisper. Come down, boy. There was no sound except for the soft sigh of the creek and the spring breeze through the leaves. Ella called again, then stopped. Maybe she got this wrong. He could be down at the creek behind Jack's house. What if he'd fallen in? She shuddered. There it was again, though, a kittenish wisp of sound coming from above, louder this time. Ngeru, she called up again, but the only sound was a footstep behind her. She swung around. Jack! Sorry, didn't mean to give you a fright. I had a bad dream, so I was awake, and I thought I heard Ngeru. Just came out to check. Jack was wearing pyjama pants and a t-shirt, his brown hair stuck up at the back from where he'd been lying on his pillow. He looked at the tree. He climbed up again. Yeah, I can hear him. Sounds like he's a long way up. Tim will be here in a minute, Jack said, turning to the house next door. I threw my jandal at his window to wake him. Had to climb over his fence to get it back, though. He's just getting dressed. He probably doesn't want the rest of the street to see him in his pyjamas, Jack. Ella looked at Jack's pyjama pants. They could almost pass for baggy shorts if they didn't have pictures of planets dotted all over them. Jack grinned. No one can see me. It's still dark. It's getting lighter, Ella said, looking up at the sky. Well, at least they're educational, Jack said. You can learn about the solar system. Tim emerged from his front door, his sandy hair combed, wearing jeans instead of pyjamas. Ngeru? He asked as he joined them. Yeah, Jack said. Thought he'd do it again, Tim said. The other day, coming home from school, the Tui Street kids had seen Ngeru leap up into the tree. They'd watched his springy little body jump and claw its way onto the branches with unexpected strength. When they'd finally managed to cool him down, and he was safely in Ella's arms, he tried to leap at Cloudbird, the tui on Louis's shoulder. It had been funny watching such a small kitten trying to catch a bird his own size. "At least he came down when I called him last time," Ella said. "What if he doesn't?" "He'll come down," Tim interrupted. "Yeah, he'll get hungry too," Jack added. "I'm climbing up," Ella said. "Just got to get onto that first branch." "But you can't." Jack looked at Tim. "Why can't she?" Lucy said from the footpath beside Jack's letterbox. "Lucy?" Ella turned. "What? You never get up early." "A story woke me," Lucy said. "I had this idea for my hero's journey story, and I had to write it down. Then I heard Tim's front door close, so I looked out my window and saw him coming here, which made me curious." Lucy reached into the pocket of her denim dungarees and took out 2 hairbands. Running her fingers through her brown hair, she pulled it into pigtails. "A story idea woke you?" Ella asked. She wished story ideas would come to her like that. Lucy nodded, then turned to Jack. "Hey, like your pajama pants?" Ella and Jack smiled, but a long meow filtered through the branches, and Ella's smile disappeared. "I'm going up after him," she said. Again, the boys looked at each other. "What's wrong?" Ella asked. "Nothing, it's just..." Tim stopped. He looked at Jack and shrugged. "There's a ladder up there," he said to Ella. "It can reach the ground, but Jack's mum pulled it up and hooked it round one of the branches up there. It's not far up. We'll show you." Jack pointed upwards and was about to speak when soft footsteps and a tapping sound made all 4 of them turn towards the street. The sound stopped. Mr. Nalfahu was leaning on his cane, looking at them. His curly grey hair was neatly combed, and he wore a long, thick coat, as he did every morning, even on a warm spring day like today. "Morning," he said. "Morning," the 4 friends replied. "Looking for your kitten, Ella?" Mr. Nalfahu asked. Have you seen him?" Ella asked. She moved to stand in front of Mr. Nalfahu so that he could see her properly. Everyone knew Mr. Nalfahu was losing his eyesight. "He's a tabby with a white bit under his chin." "I can't be certain." Mr. Nalfahu rubbed the short grey beard on his chin. "I had a restless night, so I went for a walk earlier. I was thinking about my granddaughter, Bessie, who's coming with her parents to live with me tomorrow. They want to keep an eye on me because of my bad eyesight. Bessie's quite shy, though. I do hope she makes friends." "We'll look after her," Jack said, "and she already knows me." Yes, she's met you and your family a few times when she's joined me on my walks," Mr. Nalfahu said. "Now back to your kitten, Ella. I think I saw him climbing up young Jack's tree. I thought it was a baby possum at first, but then it meowed. Not sure whether it was your tabby, though." "Bet it was," Ella said. "He likes this tree. I'm climbing up to get him." "Are you sure you want to do that?" Mr. Nalfahu asked. "Cats usually come back down." Ella nodded, looking up at the tree, disappearing into the clouds. "I have to. He's so little. Even a large bird could hurt him." "Well then, let me..." Mr. Nalfahu patted the pocket on the right side of his coat and then reached over to his left pocket. "Ah, there it is." He pulled something out. "Take this. It's good luck." He placed a small square of tupper cloth the size of a matchbox in her hand. Ella rubbed her thumb over its rough texture. "Thank you," she said, placing it in her jeans pocket. "I'd better get moving." "I'll come with you," Lucy said. Jack whistled softly through his teeth, the way he did when he was thinking hard about something. "Might as well go too, Timbo?" he said. "The more help you have, the faster the job gets done. That's what Mum says." "She's very wise, your mother," Mr. Nalfahu said. He turned and began to make his way past Jack's house. Then he stopped and called back softly, "It's a giant tree, Ella, but you'll find your kitten." He continued to walk down Tui Street. "Hope so," Ella whispered to herself. "Here, bend your knee, Ella," Jack said. I'll give you a leg up. This is how my little cousins up north get onto a horse." I can get up by myself, Jack, Ella replied. Jumping high, her brown ponytail swinging, she clutched a low branch and pulled herself up onto it. Behind her, Lucy said, I'll have a leg up, Jack. Ella could see the bottom of the rope ladder wound around a branch above. She was about to ask Jack why his mother had hidden the ladder like that, but a distant meow from above caught her attention, and she began to climb. Ella hoped that because the bottom of the ladder was wound around the branch, it would be taut and easy to climb onto. She reached out and stepped carefully onto a rung, causing the ladder to sway only a little. Hey, she said, remembering her question. Why'd your mum keep the ladder hidden? Jack looked up at Ella, who was a small way ahead of him now. She just didn't want any little kids trying to climb up and hurting themselves, he said. Ella nodded, stopping to wait for her friends to catch up. The morning sun was filtering through the branches now. She could feel its warm breath on her back and arms, and wondered whether Neru was cold further up the tree. Mountain climbers had to take warm jackets on expeditions. Maybe it was the same for people who climbed trees like this. Ella thought of Jack in his short summer pyjama pants. They definitely wouldn't be warm. He's further up than I thought he'd be, Tim said. He's a ninja cat. Ninja Neru, Jack said. That's a tongue twister, Lucy said. Let's keep going, Ella said, reaching up for the next rung of the ladder. She could hear Tim saying something to Jack below, and Jack answered, Don't worry about it. Again, Tim spoke, and this time she heard Jack say, We won't get that far. You been up here before? Lucy asked. Yeah, once, Jack answered, or twice, a few times. Long time ago, Tim added. Ella wanted to ask more, but the ladder was swinging a little, and she needed to concentrate on where she put her hands and feet. Beneath her, she could barely see Tui Street now. It was a small line amidst a zigzag of streets, a bit like the patchwork quilt on her dad and Serena's bed. They'd be waking now, Ella thought. Maybe one of them was getting up to make breakfast in bed for the other because it was Saturday morning. The thought of breakfast made her stomach rumble, and she wished she'd grabbed an apple on her way out. Her legs were beginning to feel heavy, and her fingers were sore from the rope ladder. Try to think of something else, she told herself. She thought about Neru and the funny way he darted after bits of fluff or string. A few steps up, she imagined the way his whole body rattled when he purred. Further up, she forced her thoughts from her numb, red fingers to an image of Neru curled up on her bed. Instead of making her smile, though, she felt sad. What if she lost him? You tired, Ella? Lucy called from below. Ella hadn't realised she'd stopped. Nah. I've had enough, Tim called back. Well, you never like it up here, Jack said. Yeah, well, Tim said, it's a long way down. Jack laughed. Just don't look down, Timbo. Well, can we talk about something else? Tim asked. Talking about how high we are makes me feel weird. Okay, Jack said. Haven't heard Neru for a while. He was right, Ella thought, though that could be because the breeze had turned into a wind and was possibly drowning out Neru's cries. She looked up and scanned the tree for any sign of her kitten. Instead, high in the branches above her, there were long planks of wood, neatly arranged into a huge, flat square, a sort of platform. Look, she called, someone's built something. A tree hut, Lucy cried, all the way up here. I'm just going to have a water break. Jack and Tim didn't respond, and Ella sensed that they were looking at each other. She felt a pulse of annoyance at them. They were keeping something from her. Gripping the branch above, she hauled herself upward, hoping Neru might be curled up asleep on the platform. She could see the roughness of the wood, the nails securing the wood to the branches, and how the platform had been built around the ladder. All she had to do was climb through the hole, and there'd be solid wood all around her. She pulled herself up onto the platform and sat there, her back against a branch, catching her breath. No sign of Neru. Lucy marvelled at the platform. "Wonder who built this," she said. "A normal person couldn't get this wood up here. It's a long way up." "Still no ngeru," Jack said. "Can't be too much further up," Tim added. Ella noticed that the boys had changed the topic. They didn't seem to want to talk about who'd built the platform. Just like they hadn't wanted to discuss why they'd climbed this far up the tree before. She wanted to tell them that she'd noticed, but she was too worried about ngeru to waste time talking about that. "Let's keep going," she said, standing up. "There's no ladder from here on," Tim said. "We'll be climbing up branches." Ella nodded. She knew Tim didn't like being up high, and she wasn't exactly happy at the thought of going higher either. "I haven't got a choice," she said. "Okay," Tim said, standing up slowly. "You lead the way again." It had been half an hour since they'd left the platform, and they'd still seen no sign of ngeru. It would be impossible now anyway, because a thick grey fog had descended on them, and they couldn't see each other or the branch they were holding. Tim said the fog might be a stratus cloud. He'd read about it in a school journal a couple of years ago. "Not like cumulus clouds," he said. "They're all white and fluffy and look like a cauliflower. Up higher, there's cirrus clouds, sort of wispy and white." Jack said that stratus, cumulus, and cirrus sounded like the names of knights. "Sir Cumulus, you must fight the dragon," he said, "and you must take Sir Stratus with you." Tim and Lucy laughed. "But," Jack added, "you must not confuse Sir Stratus with Sir Fartus, who was quite a smelly man." Ella joined in the laughter. Jack was taking her mind off the greyness, engulfing them, and she felt less annoyed with him, keeping a secret from her. Soon, patches of blue appeared around them. The clearer sky, though, meant that they could see the tree still rising relentlessly into the sky. Because there had been no ladder since they'd left the platform, they'd scrabbled from branch to branch. Their hands were stained and scratched from the bark. Even with the cooler air, they dripped with sweat, their breath fast and shallow, as they heaved themselves from branch to branch. Ella's mouth was dry. She needed water. She was also starting to doubt Mr. Tamati's words that he'd said earlier, that maybe ngeru just when she'd said that she'd told him that maybe ngeru didn't want to live with her, and he'd said that cats just like adventures. A gust of wind tugged at her. She let go of the branch above and leant heavily against the trunk. The world was a long way down now. Even the platform was a fair way below them. She looked down at her friends, a few branches beneath her. She was alone, on a branch, swaying in the wind. Whenever she felt unsure, she thought of her mum, who died a few years earlier. She imagined the gentle smile on her mum's face as she sat on the edge of her bed, stroking Ella's head to help her fall asleep. "He's a stupid cat, Mum," she whispered, hugging the trunk. For a few seconds, she let herself imagine she was hugging her mother. Then she pulled away. "Stupid cat!" she yelled. The wind sucked her words deep into its belly so that no one above or below would ever hear them. Smears of brown bark spread across her eyes and cheeks as she wiped away tears. Sniffing, she let go of the trunk and looked down at Lucy, who'd just reached the branch below her. "What if ngeru just doesn't want to live with me, Luce? He keeps running away all the time." Lucy pulled a twig out of one of her pigtails. "Ella, kittens run off, climbing and chasing things like Mr. Tamati said." She dropped the twig and it fell to a branch below. "You should lock your cat flap." Ella nodded. Mr. Tamati had said the same thing about kittens, and that was a good point about the cat flap. She just needed to make sure it was locked each night. Turning away, she began to climb. "Wonder what the moorpork we hear every night thinks of ngeru," Tim called up. "I mean, He lives in this tree, and ururu, Tim said, using the Māori word, are nocturnal. So just when he'd be going to sleep in the morning, Ngeru would wake him up meowing. The ruru would admire Ngeru's courage, Tim, said Jack, because ruru are really brave too. He pushed off a branch and leapt upwards. Remember Mr. Tamati told us that Māori legend about the battle between the land and seabirds? Yeah, Tim said, but I've forgotten why they had a battle. The seabirds wanted to eat freshwater fish, like eels, Jack explained, but the land birds didn't want to share. They thought the seabirds had plenty of saltwater fish to eat. Mr. Tamati said a fantail did a terrifying haka, but it was a ruru who started the battle with his weapon, his pou whenua. Jack stood still for a moment on the branch. The ruru faced an army of seabirds alone. Well, he wasn't really alone, Tim called up. His army of land birds was behind him. But he stepped forward alone, Jack said. He was probably trembling with fear, Tim, Lucy said, her eyes lighting up at the image of the battle she was picturing. In front of the ruru, masses of seagulls would have swooped and squawked. Albatross's beady eyes would have watched him as he stepped out on the sand at the edge of the forest. The sea would have roared in fury that its birds were not welcome to eat as they wished. Ella stopped and looked down at Lucy. You make it sound so... If the ruru could see us now, Lucy continued, us, he'd think we were brave too. He'd open one yellow-green eye and nod with approval as we carry out our mission to find Ngeru. Ella pictured the brown owl perching on a branch, sensing their nervousness but admiring their bravery. But, Lucy continued, he'd worry that we're just children, the ones he'd often seen below in Tui Street, and he'd feel obliged to help us. He'd decide to join us and bring an army of land birds to help too. Ruru are nocturnal, Lucy, Tim said. He's probably asleep. You have to be realistic. Don't ruru eat small animals, Ella asked, like mice and rats? The friends looked at each other. Yeah, but Ngeru's a cat, Jack said. A kitten, Ella reminded him. Ella, Lucy said, the ruru was on our side. He'd help us find Ngeru, not hurt him. He'd be the hero, setting off in the mist, dew on his feathers, his eyes piercing the swirling clouds in search of the kitten he knows you love. Lucy gazed through the branches as if the ruru might be about to sweep past them, his wings silently cutting through the air. How do you know that? Ella asked. Lucy shifted her gaze back to Ella. What? How do you think of those words, those ideas? Lucy tightened the hairband on her right pigtail as she thought, I just let them out. Hey, hear that? Jack asked. I just heard Ngeru. And that's the end of part 1 of Sky Country. And I will video part 2 for you very soon so that you can find out what happens because they've just heard Ngeru at the top of the tree. See you soon.